Well, let's just dive right in, Larry. I watched Uncle Tom. I've watched different interviews with you, and you talk very fondly about your father. How has your father contributed to your success, Larry Elder?
Well, Kevin, it's kind of strange because I wrote a book about my relationship with my father called Dear Father, Dear Son, 2 Lives, 8 Hours. And it's about an 8-hour conversation the two of us had. I didn't like my father growing up. I thought he was mean. I thought he was angry. I thought he was irritable for no particular reason. I often, Kevin, wondered why the man even had kids. If you're going to be that mean and that ornery, what's the point?
Wow.
And I told myself every day I'm going to get strong enough to beat his butt someday. Well, unfortunately, my dad starts a little cafe when I'm 10 years old. He was a janitor. He cleaned toilets. He had 2 full-time jobs cleaning toilets. Saved his nickels and dimes, starts a little cafe. So now, of course, I have to work for him. And he's no more fun to work for than he is when he's at home. Yells at me all the time, in my opinion, often for the wrong reason. I was, in my opinion, the best waiter he ever had. He was so hard on me. And one day I told myself, if this guy yells at me one more time, I'm going to walk out. I love to say, Kevin, I said to myself, if he does it one more time, I'm going to come up to him and I'm going to confront him and I'm going to say, now see here, we're going to have a different relationship. But I was afraid of my father. I could never do that. So I walked out of the restaurant. I was 15 years old. My dad came home. He was furious. He said, why did you leave? And this was the first time I ever spoke back to my dad. And I said, Dad, I got sick and tired of the way you spoke to me. My dad balled up the $10 he paid me a day. He threw it at me as I lay on the bed. He walked out of my bedroom. And Kevin, my dad and I did not have a meaningful conversation for another 10 years. When I say meaningful conversation, I mean not even, what about those Rams? Do you think it's going to rain? I ignored him. It was easy because he worked late. I was in high school. We were able to dodge each other. And so I graduated from high school. I go to college. I go to law school. I pass the Ohio bar. I get this big job with a big law firm. I'm 25 years old, making the equivalent of about $150,000. I should be living large, but I can't sleep, Kevin. And I know it has to do with my dad. Thinking about him all the time. I never thought we'd be friends, but I called my secretary. I was in Ohio in those days. I said, cancel all my appointments. I want to go to California. I'll be back in a couple of days. I didn't tell my mom and my dad that I was coming. And by the way, my mom and my dad always stayed together. They were married 56 years. He wasn't a drunk. He wasn't abusive. Nothing like that. I just thought he was mean. So I walked to the restaurant, and my dad was shocked to see me. I said, Dad, I want to talk to you. I figured it would be about a 5 or 10 minute conversation. He said, fine. So I put your bags in the back, Larry. I said, no, Dad. It's only going to be here for 5 or 10 minutes. My dad said, okay, wait for an hour when we close. So I sat there for an hour and a half, watching my dad interact. And I said to myself, now don't tee off on the guy. Just give him the cliff notes about why you're mad at him. He'll probably call you an ungrateful son. It'll last 5 or 10 minutes. You'll be out the door. My dad sat down and I teed off on him, Kevin. Based on our short relationship, you know how I can go. So I told him every whipping, every spanking, everything he ever said to me, everything he ever did to me. I told him and I told him and I told him. I talked nonstop for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, I was out of ammo. I had nothing else to say. My dad looks up. He was stirring a cup of coffee sitting next to me, 2 seats right next to each other. And he said, is that it?
Is that it?
You didn't speak to me for 10 years because of that? And I said, yes. And he said, let me tell you about my father. And Kevin, honestly, this is the first I ever heard of this. I knew my dad was an only child because we never got any presents from his family. I met his mom one time, and I knew that he had a tough background, but I didn't really care. I didn't like him. So he said, your last name, Elder? I said, yeah. He said, that's not my biological father's name. I said, what? He said, what is your biological father's name? He said, I don't know. I never met him. Who was Elder? Elder was a man who was in my mother's life the longest. My mother was illiterate, irresponsible, didn't work, drank, had a series of boyfriends, each one more irresponsible than the next one. One day he told me, I came home from school, I was 13 years old. I start quarreling with my mom's then boyfriend. She sides with the boyfriend, kicks me out of the house, never to return. 13-year-old black boy, Athens, Georgia, Jim Crow South at the beginning of the Great Depression. Good Lord. And my dad then spent the next 7.5 hours telling me about his life. And he left home, got a job doing anything, became a Pullman porter on the trains. They were the largest private employer of blacks in those days. And my dad came out to California on a run, and he couldn't believe how sunny it was. You could walk into a restaurant and get served. So my dad made a mental note, maybe someday I'll relocate to California. Pearl Harbor, my dad joined the Marines. I said, Dad, why the Marines? 2 reasons, and you know what they are. They go where the action is, and I love those uniforms. My dad was stationed on the island of Guam. He was in charge of cooking. My dad can look at a cake, Kevin, and tell you what's in it. That's how good the man is. He goes back to Chattanooga when the war is over to get him a job as a short order cook, and he's told by restaurant after restaurant after restaurant, we don't hire N-words, to his face. He goes to an unemployment office. The lady says, you went through the wrong door, sends him back to the door that says colored only, to the very same lady who sent him out. She just wanted him to know what the rules were. My dad came home, said, this is BS. I'm going to LA, get me a job. He goes out here to LA, walks around, and he's treated the same way, although they say it somewhat differently. They told him, I'm sorry, we can't hire anybody without references. My dad said, references to be a short order cook? I cooked in the military. They treated him the same way. He went to an unemployment office, this time just one door, and he took the first job, which was cleaning toilets, took a second full-time job cleaning toilets, cooked for a family on the weekend, and because he left home when he was in the 8th grade, he went to night school a couple of nights a week to get his GED. The reason the man was so cranky, Kevin, is he never slept. 15 minutes here, half hour here, hour here. You do that not day after day, not week after week, not month after month, but year after year after year, and you come home to a house with 3 rambunctious boys, what kind of mood are you going to be in? So this conversation took 8 hours, Kevin, and my dad got bigger and bigger and bigger, and Larry got smaller and smaller and smaller. Now I'm crying, and I said, Dad, please forgive me for having these views of you. And my dad said, there's nothing to forgive. You didn't know you were a kid. But follow the advice I've always given you and your brothers. Hard work wins. You get out of life what you put into it. You cannot control the outcome, Larry, but you are 100% in control of the effort. And before you moan about what somebody did to you or said to you, go to the nearest mirror and say to yourself, what could I have done to change the outcome? And finally, Larry, no matter how good you are, how hard you work, bad stuff will happen. How you deal with that bad stuff will tell your mother and me if we raised a man.